Blood has a peculiar metallic pungent smell. When it runs through your fingers, it seems thicker than you would imagine, especially when it is your own father's blood. I am sitting in this empty square now, looking at the same hands that once held his when I was a child, the same hands that later held something very different. These hands have a story to tell, a story about how a son can reach his limit when all he knows is pain. Would you judge me if you knew what I did? Maybe. But first, let me tell you what he did. My name is Miguel. I am 19 years old, and I just got out of juvenile detention, where I spent the last 2 years of my life. I'm sitting in this empty square because I still can't face the walls of my house for long. I need the open sky above my head to breathe without feeling like I'm suffocating. The people in my neighborhood know me as the kid who attacked his own father. Some call me a monster, others call me poor thing. The truth lies somewhere between these two versions, as it always does. What I can say is that no one really knows what happened in that house over the years. No one except my younger sister, my mother, and him. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or to brag about what I did. I'm here to tell my side of the story, the version that the judge heard, but that was drowned out by the lawyers and by the comments of people who never set foot in my house after the doors closed. All I ask is that you don't judge me until you hear everything, until you understand that some scars don't show on the skin, but they are so deep that they change who you are. My father knew how to leave those invisible scars until the day I decided that my sister would not bear the same marks as me. Before continuing my story, I want to thank those who are listening to me. I know it's not easy to hear stories like mine. If you've been through something similar or know someone who is going through this now, I want you to know that this story can help you understand that you are not alone. And if you think you'll like what I have to say, leave a like, subscribe to the Traumatic Testimonials channel, and comment on which part of Mexico or the world you're watching us from, because what I'm about to tell you will explain how a son who once loved his father could reach the point I reached. And believe me, what happened didn't happen overnight. It was like a wound that slowly became infected until there was no choice but to cut away the dead tissue. My childhood began like that of any other kid in the neighborhood. We had a simple house, but it was clean and organized thanks to my mother, Claudia. My father, Roberto, worked as a supervisor at an auto parts factory in Ciudad Juarez. In the early years, I remember when he came home, he would throw me up in the air and call me champ. He had a wide smile that showed a broken front tooth, the result of a fight in his youth that he recounted with pride. My sister Anna was born when I was 7 years old. I remember the day they brought her home from the hospital, so small that she fit in the space between my father's elbow and hand. Now you're the big brother, Miguel. You're going to have to take care of her, he said with a genuine pride in his voice that I would rarely see in the years to come. The change was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. First came the complaints about work, then the smell of alcohol he brought home when he came back late. The fights with my mother started small, arguments about bills, about dinner being cold, about the noise Anna and I made when we played. I was about 9 when I saw my father transformed for the first time. He came home drunk, staggering down the hall. My mother asked where he had been, and something in her voice, perhaps concern, perhaps accusation, set him off. He pushed her against the wall, yelling that he didn't owe her any explanations, that the house was his, that he paid the bills. I stood frozen in the hallway, hiding, as I heard my mother cry and apologize. The next morning, he was normal. He drank his coffee, ruffled my hair, and went to work as if nothing had happened. My mother had a purple mark on her arm that she covered with a long-sleeved blouse despite the heat. Dad was just tired yesterday, she explained without looking me in the eye. Sometimes adults get stressed, but he loves us. It was the first of many apologies I would make for him. If you are watching this and identify with what I am saying, don't forget to subscribe to the Traumatic Testimonials channel and leave a like. Your comments help us reach more people who may need to hear these stories. As the years passed, my father lost control more and more often. Alcohol became his constant companion and his temper increasingly short. But the worst thing wasn't the shouting or even the occasional shoving, it was the words. Roberto had a special talent for finding your insecurities and turning them into weapons. With me, it started when I failed 5th grade. I already had trouble with math, but the tension at home made it impossible to concentrate on my studies. "Look at us," he said the night he saw my report card. "A complete dunce, just like your uncle. You're going to end up a street sweeper like him, too." When I tried to explain that I needed help with my studies, he laughed. "Help. People who need help are weak. That's what you are, Miguel, weak." My mother tried to intervene, saying she would help me with my homework, but he interrupted her. "Don't interrupt me when I'm educating my son. He needs to learn to be a man." Over time, I learned to become invisible at home. I would come home from school and go straight to my room. I made as little noise as possible. I tried to get better grades, not to learn, but to avoid his anger. Anna, being younger, still didn't understand. She ran, played, and made noise like any other girl, and sometimes that awakened the beast. When I was 14, I tried to talk to the school counselor. I told her, without going into too much detail, that my father sometimes got angry. She asked if he hit me. At that time, he rarely used physical force. He didn't need to. His words were enough to destroy me. So I said no, and she smiled with relief. All parents get angry. Miguel, it's part of raising children. I'm sure he only wants what's best for you. That day I learned that adults didn't want to see what was happening behind closed doors. It was easier to pretend that everything was fine. At home, my mother became increasingly submissive, more subdued. She had been a pretty woman with an easy smile and long hair that smelled of coconut shampoo. Now she walked with her head down, spoke softly, jumped when we heard my father's car pulling up. I tried to talk to her once when we were alone. Mom, why don't we leave? She looked at me with frightened eyes as if the walls could hear and tell him later. Don't talk like that, Miguel. Your father is a good man, he just has problems. We have nowhere to go, son, and he is your father. As if the title of father justified everything, as if the wedding ring were a chain that imprisoned that life. At 15, I began to feel something different growing inside me. It was no longer just fear, it was anger. Anger when he humiliated my mother in front of visitors. Anger when he called me useless because I didn't understand how to fix the car the way he wanted to teach me. Anger, mainly when he made Anna cry. Anna, at the age of 8, began to develop a stutter. The doctors said it could be anxiety. My father said it was to get attention. When she stuttered during dinner, he cruelly imitated her, making her cry and withdraw even more. On a particularly bad night, I heard him yelling at her for spilling juice on the sofa. I went into the living room and saw my sister curled up in the corner, trembling. Pa, she tried to explain between sobs. It was an accident. Pa, he mocked her with a cruelty that froze me. Learn to speak properly, you silly girl. Something inside me wanted to step forward, to protect her, but the fear was still greater. That night, Anna came to my room and slept in my bed, crying softly until she fell asleep. I promised myself that one day I would get her out of there, one day when I was strong enough. If this testimony is moving you, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Traumatic Testimonies. Your support helps us continue to share stories that can make a difference in someone's life. In the years that followed, I developed a split personality. At school, I was quiet but polite. I maintained average grades, had a few friends, played soccer. No one suspected what was happening at home. Inside, I was a shadow, a ghost moving around the walls, trying not to be noticed. At night, I sometimes had dreams. I dreamed that I grew strong, that I confronted my father, that I protected my mother and Anna. I would wake up sweating, my heart pounding, feeling guilty for wanting to hurt my own father. Guilt and rage mixed together, running through me like acid. I began to have anxiety attacks and isolate myself more. My few friends stopped inviting me out. My world was shrinking more and more to the walls of that house, to constant fear and growing anger that I didn't know how to control. At 17, I was no longer the scared child I used to be. I had grown up. I was almost as tall as my father. Physically, I could have confronted him, but years of psychological abuse had taught me to bend over, lower my head, and swallow my anger until that night. The worst thing about psychological violence is that it leaves no visible marks. There's no way to go to a hospital and show how much it hurts when someone destroys your soul word by word. If I showed them my body, they wouldn't see any scars, at least not many. But if they could look inside my head, they would see a battlefield. My father had special ways of destroying us, techniques refined over the years. With my mother, it was constant humiliation. Look at this food. Even a dog wouldn't eat it, she would say at dinner, sometimes throwing the plate away. Or, have you seen Sergio's wife? Now that's a woman who takes care of herself, not a slob like you. With me, it was comparisons and constant reminders of my inadequacy. Jorge's son is already working and buying a motorcycle, and you're there, good for nothing. Or do you think you're going to be someone in life like this? You're not even good enough to carry my toolbox. With Anna, it was different. When she was younger, he still maintained a certain facade of a loving father. He brought her occasional gifts, called her princess when he was in a good mood, but as she grew older and developed her own personality, and especially after her stutter began, the mask came off. The worst part was that he knew exactly when and how to attack. He had a sixth sense for detecting when we were most vulnerable, when we had some hope so he could crush it all. In my senior year of school, I had a literature teacher who saw something in me. Mr. Rodriguez noticed that I wrote well and encouraged me to enter an essay contest. For the first time, I felt that maybe I had some talent, something that belonged to me. I worked on that essay for weeks in secret. When I was among the finalists, Mr. Rodriguez called my house to talk to my parents, excited about my potential. Unfortunately, my father answered the phone. That night, he called me into the living room. There was something in his eyes that I knew well, that cruel gleam he got when he found a new way to hurt me. "So you want to be a writer?" he asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The teacher called here, all excited about the genius I have at home. I remained silent, knowing that any answer would be used against me. "Let me tell you something about real life, son," he continued, pouring himself another glass of tequila. "Writers starve to death. They're only good for entertaining those who actually work." He took a long drink. "But let's see that masterpiece." I hadn't brought the essay home precisely to avoid this. "It's at school, I lied." "What a pity," he said, not believing me. "You know what I think? I think your teacher feels sorry for you. He probably saw that you're a poor and decided to give you a consolation prize." The words hit exactly where they were meant to. The doubt he planted grew in me like a weed, suffocating any confidence I might have developed. The next day, I didn't attend the contest finals. Teacher Rodriguez tried to talk to me afterward, but I avoided him. It was easier to give up than to risk finding out that my father was right. The worst part of this kind of abuse is how it seeps into you, becomes part of your thinking. Even when my father wasn't around, I could hear him in my head criticizing, mocking, destroying. It was like carrying my own tormentor inside me. As Anna grew older and entered pre-adolescence, I noticed changes in her too. The cheerful girl who used to run around the house singing now moved silently like a little ghost. Her stutter worsened whenever our father was around. She developed a habit of biting her nails until they bled, and sometimes I would find scratch marks on her arms that she had made herself. One afternoon when we were alone, she showed me a drawing she had done at school. It was a house with a family, but the father was drawn all in black, with pointed teeth like a monster. Mom was worried about my drawing, she told me. She asked me if there was something wrong with Kakasa. I felt a chill down my spine. "What did you tell her?" She shrugged, her eyes avoiding mine. "I said you were just a little girl I had." I hugged her tightly at that moment, feeling her little body tremble against mine. "One day it will get better, Anna, I promise." It was an empty promise, and we both knew how it could get better. My mother was becoming increasingly emotionally absent, as if a part of her had simply given up on life. She was taking medication for her nerves that left her apathetic and distant. Sometimes she would take extra shifts at the Soriana supermarket, where she worked as a cashier, just to be away from home. One night I saw my parents arguing in their room. My mother, in a rare moment of courage, mentioned divorce. The noise that followed was something breaking. Later I learned it was the mirror on the closet where he punched it inches from her face. "You're not going anywhere," he roared in a voice that reverberated through the house. "This is my family, my home. You think you're going to take my children? I'll destroy you before that happens." That night I heard my mother crying for hours. The next morning she had a different look in her eyes, the look of someone who understood she was trapped. It was around that time that I began to think about ways out. I planned to run away a few times, but how could I abandon Anna and my mother? I thought about reporting my father, but who would believe me? He was respected in the neighborhood, always polite to the neighbors, always ready to help with a repair here or there. In public, he was the devoted father, the hard-working husband. Only at home did the monster appear. If this testimony is helping you, or you think it can help someone else, please share it, and don't forget to subscribe to Traumatic Testimonies. Your support allows us to continue giving a voice to those who need to be heard. At 17, I had my first girlfriend, Julia. She was in my class, a sweet girl who saw something in me beyond the quiet boy at the back of the classroom. For a few months, I experienced moments of near normality. When I was with her, I could briefly forget the reality that awaited me at home. It was a mistake to bring Julia to meet my family. My father behaved well at first, charming and funny, but after a few beers, he started making comments that left me frozen. "So do you like my son?" he asked her with a strange smile. "I don't know what you saw in him, but you seem smart." "Too smart for him, if you ask me." Julia laughed uncomfortably, thinking it was just a clumsy joke, but he continued. "Miguel was always a little slow, you know. Ever since he was little, his teachers always complained. I think he takes after his mother's family." Each word was a knife carefully inserted to cause maximum damage. I saw Julia's confused gaze alternating between my father and me, not understanding the cruelty with which he was humiliating me. After that day, our relationship changed. She started looking at me differently. with a mixture of pity and discomfort. We broke up 2 weeks later. She said she needed to focus on her studies, but I knew the truth. No one wants to get involved with a broken family like mine. The isolation grew. At school, my last friends gradually drifted away. I rarely smiled. I rarely participated in anything. My body was there, but my mind was always alert, always worried about what awaited me at home. At night, I began to have recurring nightmares. I dreamed that I was drowning in a dark well while my father watched from above, laughing. I would wake up sweating, my heart racing, often stifling a scream so as not to wake Anna, who now frequently sneaked into my room to sleep when she was afraid. The climax came when I discovered that Anna was hiding something. She was even more withdrawn, avoiding wearing certain clothes. One day I walked into the bathroom without knocking, a mistake in any home, but especially in ours, where privacy was a rare luxury. I saw her changing her clothes. There were marks on her back, not many, but enough to make me stop at the door, horrified. "What is that, Anna?" She turned quickly, covering herself with the towel, her face red with shame and fear. "No, it's nothing, Miguel. Anna, who did that to you?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. She didn't need to. We both knew. At that moment, something crystallized inside me. The anger that had been growing for years found a focus, a purpose. My fear began to transform into something more dangerous, determination. "He won't touch you anymore," I promised, hugging her as she cried silently. Never again. That was a promise I was determined to keep, no matter the cost. Before I continue, I want to thank those who are following my story this far. I know it's not easy to hear stories like this, but it's important for people to know what goes on behind the closed doors of houses that look normal on the outside. If you know someone who is going through something like this, don't ignore the signs. Sometimes a little attention, a word of support can be the difference between someone surviving this kind of hell or not. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to Traumatic Testimonies. Your support helps us get these stories to those who need them. The days that followed were strange. Outwardly, nothing had changed. My father continued his verbal abuse. My mother remained apathetic. Anna was still scared, but inside me something had fundamentally changed. The fear that had paralyzed me for so many years began to dissipate, replaced by an icy clarity. I began to see my father with new eyes. I noticed how he staggered after drinking, how his reaction time was slower, how vulnerable he was at certain moments. I began to plan, to consider possibilities that would have been unthinkable before. The day that changed everything began like any other Saturday. My father had left in the morning to take care of some business, which usually meant drinking with friends at Don Chuy's bar. My mother took the opportunity to take Anna to the dentist. My sister's stutter had affected her bite and she needed braces. I stayed home alone, sitting on the porch, watching the quiet street in our neighborhood. Simple houses, some children playing, a dog barking in the distance. It seemed so normal, so peaceful. How could such different worlds exist just a few meters apart? Outside was normality. Inside our house was a minefield of constant terror. They returned in the early afternoon. My mother was exhausted as always. Anna had new braces that made her look even younger and more vulnerable. She smiled at me, an embarrassed smile because of the metal in her mouth. "I look different, don't I?" she asked uncertainly. "You look pretty," I replied, ruffling her hair. "You're going to have a movie star smile." My mother went to bed. The medication made her drowsy, and she took advantage of any moment my father was away to rest. Anna and I stayed in the living room watching a cooking show she liked. For a few hours, we had an almost normal afternoon, the kind that ordinary families have every day, without even realizing how lucky they are. We heard my father's car before we even saw it, the engine roaring too loudly, braking sharply in front of the house. I immediately felt Anna tense up beside me. My own body responded automatically, muscles tensing, breathing quickening, the conditioning of years of abuse. He staggered in, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the window panes. He was drunk, but not in the happy, talkative phase. He was in the dangerous phase, red eyes, face contorted into a frown, movements unpredictable. "Where's your mother?" he asked without saying hello. "Sleeping," I replied, keeping my voice neutral, avoiding provoking him. He grunted something unintelligible and went to the kitchen. I heard the sound of the refrigerator opening, then the cap of a bottle being opened. More alcohol, the last thing he needed. Anna cowered beside me, her eyes fixed on the television, but she wasn't really watching. She was in survival mode. Don't move, don't make a sound, maybe he'll ignore you. My father returned to the living room, beer bottle in hand, and slumped into the armchair. His eyes scanned the room until they settled on Anna, noticing the new device in her mouth. "Kitchen, is that on your face?" he asked in a harsh voice. Anna swallowed. "My new braces, Dad. Braces. Who authorized that? Do you know how much that costs?" "We went to the Sausalud Center," my mother replied, appearing at the door of the room drawn by the argument. "It's through the IAMS, Roberto. It didn't cost anything." He laughed. A humorless sound. Nothing. "And what do you think my taxes are?" And now we have to put up with her being even uglier with a mouthful of metal. I saw Anna's eyes fill with tears, her lower lip trembling. "She's not ugly," I said before I could stop myself. "The braces will help with her bite." My father slowly turned his eyes toward me like a predator sensing prey moving. Look who decided to have an opinion. The defender of the weak and oppressed took a long swig of beer. "She only has that crap in her mouth because of her stuttering antics. If you had raised her right from the start, we wouldn't be spending money on this crap. The stutter has nothing to do with the braces." I tried to explain, feeling the familiar pressure in my chest that always arose in these situations. The dentist said, "Ah, now you're a doctor too," interrupting as he got up from the chair. "Everyone in this house has become a specialist except me. Is that it?" The air became thick with family tension. My mother took a hesitant step forward. "Roberto, please, you're tired. Why don't you go get some rest?" It was the worst thing she could have said. His face turned red with rage. "Don't tell me what to do in my own house, you good-for-nothing. I work all week to support you, and this is how you thank me, with disrespect." He advanced toward my mother, who instinctively backed away. Anna suddenly stood up, startled by the sudden movement, and in the process knocked the remote control onto the tile floor with a loud crash. My father turned to her like an enraged bull. "You can't do anything right, Esquincla. Besides being ugly and stuttering, you're clumsy." Something in his words, in the gratuitous cruelty directed at my innocent sister, ignited a fire inside me. I stood up too, positioning myself between him and Anna. "Don't talk to her like that." My voice came out firmer than I expected. My father paused, surprised for a moment by my tone. Then his face contorted into a cruel smile. "Look at that." The cocky kid decided to crow. "You think you can stand up to me, kid? I'm just asking you not to talk to Anna like that." She didn't do anything. He took a step toward me. I could smell alcohol on his breath. "I talk however I want to whomever I want in this house, understand? Or do I need to remind you who's boss here?" I should have kept quiet. I should have bowed my head like I always did. But something had changed in me. The marks on Anna's back, the years of terror, the constant fear, it all boiled up inside me. "Now you're only brave with women and children," I said. The words came out before I could hold them back. "It's easy to be a man like that, isn't it?" It was as if I had flipped a switch. His face froze for a second, processing what he had just heard. Then the explosion. Son of a bitch. The first punch came too fast to dodge. His fist hit my face hard enough to send me reeling backward. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. I had bitten my tongue. "Roberto, no!" my mother shouted, lunging forward. He pushed her so hard she fell to the floor. Anna screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure terror that pierced through the chaos. My father turned to me, his eyes bloodshot not only from alcohol, but from a rage that had been fueled by years of frustration, of a life that had not turned out as he had planned, of a fragile masculinity that could only be asserted through domination. "You think you can defy me in my own house?" he roared, advancing. "I'm going to teach you a lesson you'll never forget." The second blow hit me in the stomach, knocking all the air out of my lungs. I fell to my knees, trying to breathe. Through the pain, I heard my mother pleading, Anna crying, and above all, my father's voice, a storm of insults and threats. "You were always weak, useless. I should have abandoned you when you were born." He pulled my hair, forcing me to look up at his face contorted with hatred. He prepared another blow, and at that moment, something inside me broke, or perhaps it was fixed. In a movement I didn't even plan, I dodged the blow and pushed his chest with all the strength I could muster. He staggered backward, surprised by the resistance, and crashed into the bookcase. Some objects fell, including a heavy metal picture frame. Our last happy photo as a family, ironically. For a moment there was a surreal silence in the room. My father looked at me with a mixture of astonishment and renewed fury. Never in all those years had he responded. "Now you've really done it, Chin," he said in a low, threatening voice. He bent down and picked up the fallen picture frame. The heavy metal frame gleamed in his hand like a weapon. He moved forward again, and I knew at that moment that he would not stop. There would be no limits this time. What happened next remains as flashes in my memory, like scenes from a movie I saw a long time ago. I remember his movement toward me. I remember Anna screaming. I remember my mother trying to get up. And I remember my body responding instinctively, no longer controlled by fear, but by the basic need for survival. When he raised his arm to hit me with the picture frame, I grabbed the first thing I could find, a bottle opener that was on the heavy metal coffee table with a sharp tip for piercing caps. There was no planning, no deliberate intention. It was as if my body knew what to do before my mind could process it. When he moved forward, I moved forward too. The tip of the bottle opener found his abdomen with an ease that still haunts me. The initial resistance of the skin, then the sensation of piercing, and then the warmth of blood on my hands. His eyes widened, not initially in pain, but in amazement. An amazement that mirrored my own. For a moment we stood there connected by that metal object, like a macabre sculpture frozen in time. What did he start to say? But the words turned into a gurgling sound when I removed the cap. The blood came next, much more than I had imagined possible. He looked down at the dark stain spreading rapidly across his shirt, and then back at me. In his eyes, I saw something I had never seen before. Vulnerability, fear, confusion. He fell to his knees, his hands pressing against the wound, looking at me as if he didn't recognize me. "Miguel," said the suddenly weak voice. "What did you do?" I was paralyzed. The bottle opener still in my hand, dripping red onto the light-colored living room carpet. The reality of what had just happened took a while to sink in. It wasn't like in the movies where the person is stabbed and keeps fighting. There he was, my father, the man I feared more than anything in the world, on his knees, suddenly looking small and old. It was my mother who acted first, running to him, pressing a rag to the wound, yelling at me to call an ambulance. Anna was leaning against the wall, her eyes huge in her pale face, her hands covering her mouth to stifle the sobs. I remember calling 911, giving our address in a voice that didn't sound like my own. I remember looking at my hands as I spoke, seeing the dried blood beginning to crack in the creases of my skin. The paramedics arrived quickly, then the police came. Questions, lights, voices. Everything seemed distant, as if I were watching through thick glass. I was placed in the patrol car while my father was taken away in the ambulance. My last vision of him was his pale face on the stretcher, an oxygen mask covering his mouth, his eyes closed. I didn't know until the next day that he had survived. The bottle opener had pierced his liver, causing significant internal bleeding, but it didn't hit any vital organs. Emergency surgery saved his life. I was held at the police station in a juvenile detention cell. It was there that reality finally hit me with full force. I had stabbed my own father. The years of abuse, the terrors we lived through for the outside world didn't matter. I was the monster. Now the legal process that followed was a fog of terms I barely understood. Self-defense, attempted murder, aggravating factors, mitigating factors. I was represented by a public defender, a tired man with a folder overflowing with cases like mine. My mother came to visit me once before the trial. She looked like she had aged 10 years in a few days, her eyes sunken, her skin grayish. She sat across from me in the visiting room, her hands shaking. "How is Anna?" was the first thing I asked. "Is she with your sister?" She answered without looking me in the eye. "She's not sleeping well, she's having nightmares." I listened to her with a pang of guilt. I had tried to protect my sister, but I ended up traumatizing her even more. "And him?" I asked, unable to say, "Dad, is he going to survive?" She replied in a neutral voice, "He's at his brother's house recovering." We were silent for a moment. There were so many things I wanted to say, ask, explain, but the words seemed inadequate, insufficient. "Why, Miguel?" she finally asked, her voice breaking. "Why did you do this?" The question hit me like a punch. After everything we went through, everything she saw, she still needed to ask. "Did you see what he did to Anna?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you see the marks on her back? And you know how he was with us every day for years." My mother closed her eyes, tears streaming down her aged face. "He's your father, Miguel. Your father." At that moment, I understood that she would never admit, perhaps not even to herself, the extent of what we had lived through. There was a part of her that was so broken, so conditioned to abuse, that she couldn't see reality clearly. It was easier to see me as the aggressor than to admit that she had failed to protect us all those years. "Yes," I replied, my throat tightening. "He is my father and I am his son, perhaps more than either of us would like to admit." She stood up abruptly as if my words had burned her. I will do what I can for you, she said without looking at me. But I don't know if I can forgive you for what you did to our family. And with that, she left, leaving me with the crushing weight of understanding that, to her, I had broken our family. Not the years of terror, not the constant abuse, not my father's violence. In court, the story was told in clinical fragments. Medical exams confirmed the marks of abuse on ANA. Neighbors testified about the screams they frequently heard from our house. My mother, pressed by the prosecutor, reluctantly admitted to some episodes of domestic violence. My father appeared on the last day, still pale, still weak, but with the same hard look as always. He denied the most serious accusations, admitting only that he lost his temper sometimes and that he may have been too strict in his discipline. He portrayed me as a troubled, ungrateful, violent teenager, the black sheep of the family. I watched him speak, controlling the rage that threatened to consume me again. It was incredible how he managed to present himself as the victim, how he managed to manipulate the narrative even there under oath. When it was my turn to speak, I told everything. The years of verbal abuse, the attacks on my self-esteem, the constant humiliations. I told about the fear we lived with every day, about how no one helped us, about how the system failed us at every turn. I told about the marks on Anna's back, about my mother's medication, about our family's isolation, and finally I told about that afternoon. Anna's new device, the insults, the fight, the picture frame used as a weapon. I explained that I did not plan to attack him, that it was an act of self-defense in a moment of panic and desperation. I did not want to hurt him, I said, looking directly at the judge. I just wanted him to stop. I wanted everything to stop. In the end, I was found guilty of aggravated assault, but with mitigating circumstances due to the history of domestic violence. Because I was a minor at the time of the crime, I was 17 years and a few months old. I received a sentence of 2 years in a juvenile detention center with mandatory psychological counseling. My father received no punishment for what he did to us over the years. Justice worked for me, but not for him. If you are watching this video and you identify with this story, please remember that you are not alone. Leave a like and subscribe to Testimonios Traumáticos to support this channel that gives a voice to those who have suffered in silence. In the 2 years I spent in detention, I learned a lot about myself and other young people broken by the system, by family, by life. I had regular therapy for the first time, facing the demons inside me. I finished my studies there with decent grades. I planned what I would do when I got out. Anna visited me a few times, always accompanied by my aunt. I never saw my mother again after the trial. Through Anna, I learned that she had moved back in with my father as soon as he had fully recovered. Some chains are invisible, but no less real for that. As for my father, I never spoke to him again. Anna told me he was more restrained now, less violent. The fear of another rebellion perhaps kept him in check. Or maybe the fact that he had been so close to death had changed him in some way. I would like to believe that, but I doubt it. I was released 2 weeks ago at the age of 19. An adult now in the eyes of the law. A man marked by a past I never chose, carrying an uncertain future. Now I'm sitting in this empty square, watching the world go by around me. People walking, talking, living normal lives that seem to belong to a parallel universe to mine. I decided not to return to the house where I grew up. Some bridges, once burned, should not be rebuilt. I am temporarily living with a distant uncle, my mother's brother, who always suspected that something was wrong but never interfered. Like so many others, he preferred not to get involved. Now, perhaps moved by belated guilt, he offered me a room in the back of his house and a job in his mechanic's shop. It's not much, but it's a start. A place to sleep, food on the table, a minimum wage, enough to save while I decide what to do with the rest of my life. In reform school, I discovered that I like to write. I started with a journal recommended by the psychologist and evolved to short stories and occasional poems. Words on the page gave me the control I never had in real life. I'm thinking of maybe doing a technical degree, then perhaps studying journalism or literature. They're distant dreams, but for the first time I have permission to dream them. Anna is better. Her stutter has improved significantly with therapy, although it still appears when she's nervous. She comes to visit me on Sundays when our father goes fishing with his friends. We bring food, sit in the same square, and talk about normal things. Her studies, her friends, the boy she likes at school, moments of normality that I value more than I can express. She once asked me if I regret what I did. It's a complex question that I'm still trying to answer for myself. I regret traumatizing my sister that way. Yes, deeply. I regret hurting my father, almost taking a life too, as complicated as it is to admit. Violence is never the answer, they say. But what do you do when you've tried all the other answers and no one listened? I regret finally standing up for myself, ending the cycle of abuse. No, that's the uncomfortable truth I carry with me. If I could go back in time, I would do things differently. I would seek help earlier. Maybe I would run away with Anna. I would find a less drastic solution, but I wouldn't allow us to continue living in that hell day after day. The system failed us at every turn. Teachers who saw the signs but didn't intervene. Neighbors who heard the screams but turned a blind eye. Overworked social workers who didn't investigate thoroughly. A society that romanticizes the family at any cost, even when that family is slowly killing its members day after day. I'm not here to be celebrated as a hero or condemned as a monster. I am here only to tell my story, so that maybe somewhere someone who is living what I lived will see that they are not alone. So that maybe somewhere a teacher, a neighbor, a friend will see the signs and do something before it's too late. If this testimony has moved you or you think it can help someone else, please subscribe to Traumatic Testimonies and share this video. Every like helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories. The psychologist at the detention center once told me that breaking the cycle of violence is like diverting the course of a river. It requires tremendous strength and unwavering determination, but once done, the waters will never flow the same way again. I am determined to break that cycle. I will not be like my father. I will not repeat his mistakes. I will not channel his anger. I will not perpetuate his pain. I visit the grave of my childhood every day. Not a literal grave, but the remains of what could have been a normal family, a normal life. I mourn the child I was, the man my father could have been, the mother my mother could have been if she weren't so broken inside. The future is a blank page, and for the first time I have the pen in my hand. I don't know exactly what I'm going to write on it, but I know what I'm not going to write. I'm not going to write a story of violence, of fear, of power used to hurt the weakest. If there is one lesson I have learned, it is that we are more than our worst moments, more than our worst actions, more than the worst acts committed against us. We are the sum of our choices, and every day is a new opportunity to choose differently. For those who are going through what I went through, my message is simple. Seek help, talk, don't isolate yourself. There are people who will believe you, even if the first ones don't. Don't wait until the only way out seems to be violence. And for those who know someone who may be living in the silent hell of domestic abuse, don't ignore the signs. A moment of courage, of intervention, can save not only a life, but future generations. Today, when I look at my hands, I still sometimes see my father's blood. It's not really there, of course, but the memory remains. What comforts me is knowing that these same hands can build instead of destroy, can right instead of hurt, can hug my sister and show her that not all men are like our father. The sun is beginning to set on this empty square, casting long shadows across the concrete. Soon I will return to the room at the back of my uncle's house. I will write a few more pages in my journal and try to sleep without nightmares. Tomorrow will be another day, a day when I can choose to be better than what I was taught to be. If you've read this far, thank you for your courage in listening to my story. Not all scars are visible. Not all monsters have fangs. Sometimes the worst demons live inside the home, using the title of family as a shield and a weapon. May we all find the strength to face them, preferably before it's too late. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to Traumatic Testimonials. Leave a comment telling us where in Mexico or the world you are watching us from. Your support helps us continue to share these stories that need to be told.